What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. Happy Thursday. Hopefully, everybody's doing well. Welcome to the show. Wait for a couple of people to roll in here. Peter86. He said, "All I came." He said, "Oos." That's all I came for. Got to get back to work. Well, thanks for stopping by. We appreciate the oos. El Sueño, what's going on? Doug, glad you could join us. TB Metal Art, what's up, man? Glad you could join us. Check out got the TV Metal Art back there. You guys want to get you some art? Check it out. Sammy Prom, Oos, what's going on? What's going on, guys? Instagram, if you want to hit us up, we're going to be on YouTube. You just switch off here and let a couple people roll in. We start the show. Driftwood Fishing, Oos, what's going on, man? Cave Dog in the house. What's going on, dude? How's everybody doing today? You guys been fishing? What's the weather been like? Corey King, Oos, welcome to the show. Spotty Guy, what's going on, man? I guess school's starting. It's been busy over here. I mean, just watching shouldn't say busy. It's been slowing down because everybody's like going back to school, but it's been busy, like traffic and then all the kids going back to school and stuff like that. I don't have one in school yet, so I'm not quite sure. Spotty Guy, what's going on? Oos, welcome to the show. If you guys are new to the show or just watching, people typing Oos just basically means they hit that like button. So we appreciate that if you guys hit the like button. Thank you, Todd. Matches the art behind me. Yeah, I got this a couple years ago. I actually got this hat when I think it came with this picture, the avatar picture. I bought it. I think it was like a combo deal or something online. Gabe said, got a 15-inch calico on the Rainbow Roll 15 gram last night. Forgot to at you. Hey, man. Yeah, if you didn't tag us, it didn't happen. No, I'm just kidding. Congratulations, dude. That's awesome. As long as we're working, as long as you guys are getting bit, I mean, that's the biggest thing. Driftwood Fishing says school traffic is the worst. Yeah, it's pretty bad. It's always like at the beginning, it's like even though these people have been going to school and a lot of kids are just returning, and it's like nothing really changed. They just had a couple months off for summer, but then everybody gets out of the routine, and shows up late. It definitely takes like a couple weeks for people to start getting back in the swing of things. It's pretty crazy. Awesome. Yeah, go ahead and get this party started. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Submission Fishing Live podcast. Hopefully, you guys are all doing well. My name is Mufto. I'm your host, owner of Submission Fishing Co. We make slowpitch jigs. Glad you could join us on today's show. We're going to be talking about some news stories, obviously answering your questions, and be going a little bit over slowpitch jigging for yellowtail. Yellowtail bites still hot in Southern California. Hottest it's been in like a long time. And we got some theories about that. And I mean, kind of Kevin Nakata talked about it. You guys know him, Fishing Reps, but he used to be a guide and used to do like yellowtail guides out in La Jolla and stuff like that. And, he's got millions in his days. And, he kind of had some theories about the yellowtail fishing and stuff, but it's been really good. And, I've got quite a few on the slowpitch jigs, primarily the submission jigs, obviously. So give you guys some tips, or if you have any questions, obviously let me know. I can just share with you, what's worked for me, how I've been able to land them, catch them, stuff like that, and things I've learned, fish I've lost, and things we've changed, to help you guys get the bite going. So Calendar Life, what's going on, man? We're on YouTube. If you want to hit us up over here, that's where the real party's at. Lalo Fish, Oos, what's going on, man? Glad you could join us. Welcome to the show. Let's see here. Story. Let me do a couple news stories here. One interesting story was they're building. Looks like they're building an artificial reef in Louisiana, calling it the Cajun Coral. And the only thing that's interesting about this story, putting artificial reefs and stuff like that isn't like really revolutionary or anything like that. They do it everywhere. Southern California, huge here in Florida, uh, and all that stuff. But one thing was interesting to note that the reason that they're putting this artificial reef in was because I guess they pulled out like a gas. They decommissioned. Yeah, here you go. Last year, a decommissioned oil rig named the Hotel Sid was removed. The executive vice president of CCA Louisiana said the spot was a focal point for the fishing community. Graves grew up fishing the island. Similarly, he said the move was depressing because it's destruction of marine life and impact on anglers. And the new reef has been named Raising Cane's Hotel Sid in honor of the oil rig and the Graves hefty donation. So yeah, I guess like the Raising Cane's chicken guy's been donating a lot of money, which is definitely really cool. But the interesting thing was that the oil rig, and we've talked about this before, it's sometimes we put these structures, and I know a lot of people complain about like oil rigs and trash, and it's funny how some of those things end up becoming habitats for fish, and then you get this conundrum where people want these things torn out, um, but they've actually created ecosystems. This oil rig has been there for years, basically cultivates fish. The fish live there, and you guys know any reef, whether it's the Great Barrier Reef, which is the coral reef, or any type of structure or reefs or rocks that have been around, they basically become homes to fish, and they're not always destructive. As long as it's not leaking oil and stuff like that, it's just a structure in the ground. People think they're eyesores, but a whole bunch of bait fish live there. They bring in the predators, and it basically forms this whole ecosystem. And what happens is a lot of times they tear these things out, and then what happens is you basically destroyed like a whole fish ecosystem, and it becomes a problem, where they try to get rid of these things thinking they're helping, but in the end it doesn't do so much, and it actually just destroyed one ecosystem. And it's pretty crazy how resilient fish are, and they'll basically turn anything into a structure and use it. Out here in Florida, they basically just sink ships all the time, decommission these things, um, to create artificial reefs, that didn't exist. It's just sand flats out here, and they make them. There's some in Carlsbad too. I know California, there's reefs. They got the artificial reefs. They poured some in the Back Bay, a couple years ago. Same thing, the cement balls, trying to create reefs for the fish. But it's just always interesting to see how adaptable they are. So huge thing going down in Louisiana. And one other thing I wanted to point out was that this being basically kind of spearheaded by the CCA Louisiana too. You guys know I talk about the CCA all the time, the Coastal Conservation Association. They're here in Florida, Texas, California, obviously. And I talked last week about how fishermen like to preserve, and basically the biggest conservationists out there are typically fishermen. And you can see the CCA out there, spearheading really a project to get more reefs for these fish. Again, creating fish, helping the ecosystem. Something was torn out that was kind of detrimental to the environment, and the CCAs are kind of picking up the slack, putting in, and it was like, I have to pull up the story again, but it was like 1,000 those cement reefs and stuff like that over like 15 acres of land. So that's pretty cool. That's out in Louisiana. So commend those guys. CCA works kind of differently in every state. They have their own kind of organization. So if you're not a part of that, definitely check it out and join them if you guys want to definitely help prevent your fishing rights from getting eroded. What's going on, guys? Body Bull. What's up, man? Come join us on YouTube. Probably working hard. Check out Spotty Bull, guys. If you guys haven't followed him, everybody about Southern California, they know about the Spotty Bull. And yeah, speaking of the CCA, you guys know we talked about the MPAs in the last show. For those of you guys that aren't familiar with that, the marine protected areas in Southern California specifically, they already take up 16% of the 16% already of the fishable waters in Southern California. And there's been petitions by a bunch of special interest groups trying to basically expand the MPAs. You fight these things and you kind of sleep on them, and they're kind of rearing their ugly heads. Now, last time we talked about basically the Cabrillo one, which is at the tip of Point Loma. There's already an MPA there, which is protected and you can't fish, but it's only about a half square mile or something like that. Well, they're trying to expand that to 16 square miles, which is huge. They want to take it from basically the tip of Point Loma all the way up to Sunset Cliffs, which is really it's like almost up by Mission Bay, the mouth of that bay. They want to close that whole kelp off. One detail I didn't have was, how far it was going to extend. We know it was 16 square miles, but they want to, here's the thing. They want to push this thing out 3 miles, 3 miles from the shore. You know what that means? 3 miles is the border for all state water. They basically want to close down all of California's state waters from that point. State waters extend to 3 miles. Once you get outside of 3 miles, it turns into federal waters. So what they're proposing, what these groups are proposing, is taking up basically from Point Loma all the way up to Sunset Cliffs. You guys all know the Point Loma kelp. We all fish it. The pipe is there. So much fishable area there. And they want to take that Sunset Cliffs 3 miles out, basically closing off the entire kelp 3 miles offshore. It's just absolutely ridiculous. You guys know they're having public hearings going on, so you guys definitely got to get in on that. Join the CCA, people that can fight these things, and get out there. And what's crazy is this is only the tip of the iceberg, and I've only talked about the Cabrillo thing. It's because it's the biggest expansion that they have basically proposed. But I think guys know Tony from CCA. She's been on the show couple times. I just saw something in her story. I didn't really investigate it all that much, but there was some other post about more petitions and expansions, but they were like kind of all over the Channel Islands and stuff like that. So it's not just the Cabrillo MPA down at Point Loma. They're looking to expand it pretty much all over the place. I think that's the biggest one. That's what caught my attention, just because it was such a huge land grab. And but I was seeing a map, like a heat map of kind of where they want to go. But like Channel Islands, Catalina, I mean, they were going just all over the place. And that was just from like 2 petitions or something like that. And out of 20 that they've received. So you guys definitely got to get on that. You got to get into these meetings. You got to talk to people. You got to make waves. Nothing's definitive. Nothing's going to change. But if you don't say anything and you don't speak up and, you don't make a stink about it, they're just going to pass these things. And there's very little oversight. So unfortunately, the people that make the decision are like California Fish and Game or California Wildlife. They're the ones that make the change. So a lot of this it's not like it goes to vote or public vote or anything like that. It just gets pushed through. And the thing that's brought these changes to the table to be looked at is basically their environmental groups are bringing these to the table, and they're making the petitions. So that's really what's going on. A lot of them, they try not to name, they try to fly under the radar. But these special interest groups and environmental groups, I mean, these nut jobs, let's just call them that, they're just trying to shut everything down. They make these petitions, they get so many signatures or whatever it is. And then once they kind of get them validated, they bring them forth to, the state, and then the Fish and Game basically reviews them. And if they think they're valid or legitimate, then they put them into practice and then expand things like MPAs and stuff like that. So it's a huge deal. You guys already just think about out there where you can't fish, and then expend that tenfold. I can't stress it enough how much you guys really got to fight for that stuff out there, because I haven't heard a lot of people talking about it, and you guys really got to be aware. That's the one in the Cabrillo, basically removing all of the Point Loma kelp. Like, where are you going to fish? What kelp do you have left? Kelp only grows on the coast. Yeah, it only grows shallow. It doesn't grow really any deeper than 75 feet. You know what I'm saying? It needs the sunlight. It uses the colder water. It only grows really there in Southern California. And they've already basically co-opted and land grabbed most of the kelp in La Jolla that people fished. The little bit that you had up in like Encinitas is gone. And you've got that big whole stretch up in like Point Loma that everybody fishes there. Like you said, you got the pipe there, which is natural. All that's gone. If this one goes, like, that's it. You're basically going to have almost no kelp left to fish down there in San Diego, really Southern California, if you let them run away with this thing. So definitely put that on your radar. And like I said, if you can't fight, you don't have the means, you don't have the time to go into these meetings, I understand, but support the people that do. Support groups like CCA and people fighting the fight. So if that's what you got to do, that's what you got to do. So he's just crazy, man. You just sleep on it for a little bit and they try to go after it. The worst part is it's not even fishing isn't even the cause. They're worried about the kelp eroding. I mean, which is understandable. Nobody wants um like nobody wants the kelp to disappear. That doesn't benefit anybody. It doesn't benefit anglers. But their biggest concern um is the water is heating up. And that's primarily what they think. So nobody really knows why the kelp is dwindling. Most of the consensus is their scientific take is that it's the water's heating up. But if the water's heating up and has nothing to do with the fishing, why close it down and shut it off to all the fishing? That's just the roundabout excuses and the way they talk themselves into a pretzel to get it shut down, and try to save it when fishing isn't even the issue. It's just crazy. Real issues is runoff from rain, pollution. None of that stuff gets talked about, especially with all the record rains they've had in Southern California. That stuff comes off. You get the bacteria, all that crap that comes from the street, and sewage runoffs. They have sewage breaks all the time. I mean, that kills the kelp too. There's so many other factors that they don't really address, that are probably the underlying causes of some of the kelp damage. Urchins are another one. They eat the root off of the rocks. And fishing is the least of their worries, but they want to close it down anyways. But that's the excuse that they use. Fishermen get the blame for everything. It's as easy to point at them and say this is why, even though there's no direct correlation. They even admit that in their thing. Like, it has nothing to do with fishing, but to close it down anyway. So, anyways, I did a whole segment on that last week. So, check that out. I don't care what state you're in. If it involves fishing rights, I'm here to fight for it. So, if you guys live in other states or anything like that, let me know. I'm here for it. Especially here in Florida, we're pushing to get the basically fishing enshrined in our Constitution, which is crazy. They don't have out here, and other things. And some other thing in Florida too. They like I didn't know this, but I was just reading up on it. Like they've like some Sharks Act where they're trying to. This committee was put together to like take a look at like sharks and stuff like that because they're becoming a real problem out here. And again, this is a whole nother thing where conservation kind of came in and it was just really just kind of misguided, misplaced. It wasn't really scientific based. Everybody wanted to protect sharks because I don't know, like they thought they were endangered. Like nobody wants to see the species endangered, obviously. But you used to be able to catch a lot more sharks out here, but they kind of had these big sweeping protections about sharks and very stringent, very strict protections for sharks. But now sharks are a big problem. You can hardly bring anything up here in Florida without having to get sharked or having to fight it. And you think, oh, what's the big deal? You don't, it's just less fish you get to eat. Like that's one aspect of it. But the biggest thing that they don't talk about, or they call it the shark degradation is because it's the sharks are destroying the habitat. And the biggest problem is when you're pulling up fish, even when fish are illegal to keep, you have to send them down or descend them, right? Let's take red snapper, for example. If red snapper on the Atlantic coast has only one day a year that you can fish this year. Again, that has to do with the NOAA. They don't know what the hell they're doing. They don't do research. They don't have the people, so they just close it. That's a whole other thing I can get down. But anyways, there's one day that you could fish red snapper because they think red snapper is a population problem, which it really isn't. But the thing is, you catch these snapper, right? And this has happened to me multiple times. You catch these giant red snapper. You can't keep it, so you have to send it down. I can't tell you how many red snapper I've sent down just to watch them be demolished by sharks and eaten by sharks. You can't take it home. Like, what a waste, right? Can't take it home, can't feed your family, can't feed your neighbors with it. You send it down to just basically get eaten by sharks. And the biggest thing is like, how is that? And that's one of the reasons that they cited for having like the 1 day rule, because they're accounting for, they know that the sharks are eating these things. They're destroying the other populations, because if you're catching these fish and releasing them, they don't make it. Very few make it down to the bottom. So it's illegal for you to take, you release them and sharks just destroy them, or sharks destroy them when you pull them up. You're pulling up a fish that's not within slot, that's not legal to keep. Well, it doesn't matter. It's been eaten on the way up. So it has nothing to do with fishermen keeping the fish or even over harvesting. We can't even send them down to have them recover because the sharks just destroy them. You tell me how that is tell me how that's conservation minded, you know? And it was this whole thing about they had to protect these sharks. Well, now they're out of control. It's a very big problem out here because it was just overreach. They just, "Oh, shut it down. We can't even have," you know, there's no logic behind it. There's give us tags, give us a limit, give people something, some sharks that you can keep. You have to control it. And I don't understand when the government always takes the human element out of conservation or out of fishing. Like you can't discount humans keeping populations in check. And you just think nature is going to run wild. Well, we're part of nature too. And if you just let them do their own thing, you run into problems. Out in Southern California, you know, it's the whole thing with the sea lions are a problem. And they've taken over beaches. They tear up the kelp. They eat the predators in the kelp. You need um, sheephead to basically eat these urchins and stuff like that. But now if you have these sea lions that are just unchecked, what do you think they eat? They eat these fish that eat the urchins. It's just crazy. It, it's just wild to me. The more problems that are created with shutting stuff down, and then that's really the biggest problem is the complete shutdown of the fishing instead of just putting limits, doing lotteries, making tags. I'm okay with like scaling it back, you know, if there's an issue, but when you just shut it down completely, you have no control over it. You have no reporting. There was a book and an article about that too. Some guy wrote that when you basically take something completely out of the realm and you don't fish it anymore, you lose all of the data because the fishermen are what provide the data to the fish and game. The fishermen, the captains, the dock people, all these people are the ones that are supplying the data that the government uses in order to enact these things. So when you basically take something off of the list and just say you can't even fish this anymore, you've basically removed all the data and you no longer have any data points. And you've just got the species running rapid and you don't know what it's doing. Cowcotter are one in California, right? Where you don't know how many you are, what's going on with them because you can't fish them anymore. There are no reports on them. You don't know if they're scarce. You can't control it. And there's plenty of cowcod, but they just say, "Oh, just shut it down," and then they just run unchecked. And these giant cowcod are probably just destroying all the other, you know, so many other fisheries and stuff like that. It's crazy how little common sense we have. And they're going to do the same thing, you know, with these MPAs and stuff. But yeah, shutting it down is definitely not the answer. And you know, stopping hunting of all predators is certainly not the answer either. It just creates more problems. And it's just wild that we can't figure that out. You know, environmentalists don't want you to kill any. They don't want you to kill sea lion because they're cute or they're nice looking, but they're not endangered at all. You look in any reports, they're of least concern. They're not even near threatened extinction, like not even close. You could wipe out sea lions till the cows come home and they won't be a problem. They breed fast. It's not an issue. It's just an issue, you know, but you want to save some of your kelp. I recommend thinning out some sea lions. Luckily, you got some killer whales in there, you know, Southern California. They're helping to thin it out. But, you know, that becomes a whole nother issue too. Now you get predators because you have so many sea lions. What eats the sea lions? Great whites, stuff like that. You know, now you got this whole other invasive species coming in because they know the food's there and it's just screws the whole ecosystem up, man. It's wild, really wild. TV Miller, so we can still fish Imperial Beach by the Poop River. Yeah, man. We get some sewer fish. Hell yeah. Corey King says, "Has the CCA said anything about the issue yet?" Well, Captain Dan sent me the story. Yeah, I know he's in. He's a member of the CCA. I haven't heard anything. I haven't seen any reports. That's what worries me. Is I really haven't. I've seen so little on like social media or anybody even talking about it. However, Tony uh, Bongos, who's been on this show many times, she's part of the CCA now as well, and she did have a post about it. So I'm starting to see a little more traction, but it doesn't seem like enough. I mean, to be honest with you, it really doesn't. I mean, it's like when we had it seemed like when we had the 30 for 30 going on where they were trying to take 30% of the land and water, there was like they were all over it. You know, we heard about it. And I'm just trying to stop it because they're still having public what is it? Public reaction and hearing and stuff. I don't want us to get to the point where they accept the proposal and the petitions, and now you have to fight it where they're already trying to accept something. It's easier to kind of stop it where it is. Yeah, are the killer whales still there? Killer whales were actually a good thing. I mean, honestly, they were. But killer whales like typically didn't come to that area, but they're probably there because there's so many sea lions now. It's crazy. Sea lions are just like they're basically like rats. They're like vermin of the sea. Like, what do they really provide? I don't know, man. They just smell like trash, spread disease, eat up the beaches. It's wild. I mean, when you have them in reason, that's fine. I'm sure they keep some of the population down, but it's wild. Oh, there we go. TV Miller. Captain Dan is on KUSI on Saturday talking about, yeah. Yeah, he sent me the story originally a couple weeks ago. So um, he brought this to my attention. So I really appreciate him. He sent me the info in an email. So he's looking out. And by proxy of that, I've been able to come out and talk about it and stuff. So, it's getting out there. Andre, what's going on, man? Oops, welcome to the show. David Chrisman, what's going on, man? Welcome. Chitch City, what fish are you referring to? Um, Really, I was just talking about the MPAs. They're trying to expand the MPAs and shut down, um, not really the fish per se, but a whole area that you can actually fish. They're trying to expand the Point Loma MPA by 16 miles, 3 miles out of the state wire waters, and then from Point Loma up to Sunset Cliffs. So not really specific fish, specific area. Yeah, so just keep that on your radar. And like I said, last show, if you guys want to hear it, it's on Spotify. I uploaded it. The old one's on YouTube as well. So you can definitely go check that out. What's going on, guys? Instagram. I'm going to sign off here. If you want to follow us, you can find us on YouTube. Later. All right. So let's talk about some yellowtail fishing a little bit. If you guys have any questions, obviously, let me know too. Let me bring up my notes here. So I know the yellowtail are still doing well. I was just looking at the fish counts out there in Southern California, and they're still really good. Looks like bluefin were really good too. And then the yellowtail fishing has been pretty good. And what's interesting is like the yellowtail fishing has been better than I've seen it in a long time. And like I said, Kevin, you guys know Kevin Nakata from Fishing Reps. He used to be, he was a guide for a long time, and he really used to crush these things. He'd go out and find sea bass, yellowtail. He was a guide primarily. He'd go out to uh, La Jolla and stuff like that, and he'd catch a lot of yellowtail. And a lot of these guys are getting them at the islands and all that. And he was thinking that it was just he kind of thinks yellowtail bite's been good for a while, but um, his theory is that everybody for the last couple years has been like so die hard on catching the bluefin and stuff like that that it's everybody's been chasing bluefin because it's been such a novelty that a lot of people are somewhat getting like bluefin fatigue and then going back and now and fishing the islands. And he might not be wrong. I don't know if that's the total case. I think definitely the yellowtail are thicker than they have been, but um, it is kind of a good point, where you neglect some things and you go looking for other fish. And with the bluefin, I feel like they've been around for enough years. I think enough people have been on these big bluefin trips and um, they've gotten them. So now they're kind of like, oh, we'll go a little closer and catch some yellowtail and stuff like that. It's like, oh, maybe the islands are kind of a good check. So it's been interesting to see. I don't know if that's the whole story. That was just kind of a theory he was throwing around, but um, yeah, yellowtail they've been popping off. So I just want to talk a little bit about slow pitch jigging yellowtail. What I've learned, I mean, most of the yellowtail I've caught have been jigging, obviously. I've caught quite a few on the submission jigs. And it's a little different technique, and just give you guys some tips to make you a little more successful with it. Obviously, tried and true out there in Southern California. It's obviously the surface iron. You know what I mean? This is like classic yellowtail fishing. Throw it on the top, let it swim. But there's situations where you're going to want something a little different, or if you just want to try something a little bit different. Different jigs. Of course, we're talking artificials. You could always fly line, live bait, and stuff like that, depending if that's what the boat's been going on. But we're going to talk a little bit about jigging. And really, the first thing you've got to understand is like the different kind of um, jigs to use, but where you're going to be fishing. Yellowtail can be caught usually kind of two different places. There's the islands, and where it's shallow, sometimes it's sub 200 feet. Or are you fishing for yellowtail off of patties and structures, um, kind of out deep in the middle of the water? And that's really going to dictate like what gear you're going to use, and it's going to make a difference because it's really kind of two totally different types of yellowtail fishing. When you're going into the islands and stuff like that, um, and you're going to be and they're not on the surface and you're fishing the bottom. This is how I got a couple on the first submission at Sea Trip we did. Um, I pulled one off of the bottom on a javelin. I think Jeff, somebody else, got one on like the 60 gram, and then I know in Coronado I've got them two from the bottom, and that's typically so when the yellowtail are basically near the bottom or close to the bottom. One popular technique is the yo-yo fishing, right? Where you just send kind of a heavier surface iron down, you burn it up as fast as you can get it. And the good thing about that is when you get them to bite, you're kind of already like halfway up the water column and you've got some momentum to pull them. But when you're dealing with slow pitch jigging, basically you're trying to entice the bite with like a slower um, kind of pace, right? When they're on the bottom, they're not typically uh, actively feeding, so to speak. Yellowtail usually come to the top or they're catching bait fish, but when they're chilling out, they'll stick around and they hang out around the rocks and the structure and everything, basically at the bottom of um, the islands and everything like that. I mean, they don't always just swim around. They are pelagics and they'll swim around for food, but a lot of times they just kick it. So when they're not very active, they'll just be at the bottom. So in order to present a bait from them, I mean, slow pitch jigging is like one of the best when they're just kind of lethargic, chilling out at the bottom. You send the jig down, let it hit the bottom. You work your way up. Usually, when I do this, I get bit on like the second or third pop. The jig goes down, it flutters slow. So here's the thing you guys have to know. And my first tip when you're fishing yellowtail slow pitch jigging and you're close and shallow is you have to use heavy gear, heavy gear, heavier than you probably think, because what you're going to run into is when yellowtail are hooked, especially when they're on the bottom, the first thing they're going to do is dive down and run into the rocks. They're very strong and they're going to break you off. If you're using um, basically super thin leader, and more than anything, if you're using an undersized reel and you don't have a rod with enough power, or you don't have the know how to pull it up, it's usually going to be in the reel. But if you're on an undersized reel, bait caster, like a small spinning setup, a lot of times you're going to lose your fish because once they get bit, they dive down straight and they break you off in the rocks. They go into the reef. They know how to get out and they're strong. So when you're jigging, slow pitch jigging especially, um, and you're trying to pull these things just 10 feet off of the bottom or something like that. A lot of times I get bit. I hit the jig on the bottom. I'll lift it one, two, sometimes three pumps. I know for a fact I'm like 5 feet, maybe 7 feet from the bottom when one of these yellowtail eat the jig. You've got to be able to pull this thing basically off the bottom, or you're just going to get smoked. You're going to let it run. You're going to pull drag for a few seconds, and then it's going to be gone. It's going to pop off. So my recommendation is if you know you're fishing the islands and you're going to be fishing the bottom or anywhere where it's fairly shallow, you probably should go heavier than you think you need to. You're probably going to be deep enough where you can run heavier gear too. We're not talking about the surface. We'll talk about the surface fishing. Surface fishing, where they're closer, your line size and diameter really makes a lot more difference because they can see the water's more clear. There's sunlight involved. There's other things going on where you really need the lighter gear. When you're fishing the bottom, they're down in the mud and the dirt and the rocks. It's not as important. When they come up and smoke these jigs, and even if you're fishing on like a dropper loop, it's the same thing. If you're too light, you're going to get smoked. They're going to eat this thing and pull you in. So get a heavier reel. I would say like a fathom 15, fathom 25. I mean, this is kind of the setup that I would use if I'm fishing them basically off the bottom. I think this is the Fathom 25 narrow. We've got 40-pound test on this thing, and it's pretty heavy. You would think for fishing yellowtail, like what do you need a 40-pound with? Now, this is just one of the heavier slow pitch rods too. This is the Phoenix 150 to 300 grams. So this is one of their heavier Titan rods, and with 40-pound. Now the thing is, we button this drag almost flat out. Like this thing's got like almost 40 pounds of drag, 35 pounds of drag. We put the drag on this thing basically maxed. And the reason of that is we don't really want it pulling drag. And secondly, that's why you're going to need the heavier leader. I think right now we've got, and we weren't fishing yellowtail on this one, obviously, but we were fishing amberjack, which are basically very similar fish. And I think we've got like 60-pound test on this thing. And we get bit all the time. So out here in Florida, and this is how I fished it on the islands when you have to go heavy. Out here in Florida, we fish amberjack. They're the same type of fish. It's a jack. Yellowtail's a jack, yellowtail jack, amberjack. Very, very similar fish. But it's the same thing when you're fishing structure and we're jigging them off the bottom. If you don't have this thing cranked down, buttoned down with a heavy leader, you just get smoked. So keep that in mind. It's going to be kind of ridiculous, and it's going to be a heavy fight because you have to basically get them up. Don't give them an opportunity to go down and dig, and you're just going to lose them. So go heavy, and don't give them an opportunity to run because they're going to run. And if your gear's not strong enough or heavy enough, trust me, you're going to regret it. Even if you're using smaller jigs, it doesn't matter. You got to make sure that you've got something that's going to be able to take the fight. I recommend going with monofilament. You're going to be down anyways. Fluoro doesn't matter. The mono is going to give you that shock. So when you really pull on these things and you get that big bite and you need to wrench this thing up quick and you're fighting the hell out of it to get it out of the wreck, the mono is going to provide you the stretch that you need without breaking. Fluorocarbon's a little more brittle. The knots actually don't hold quite as well. So when you're trying to put that immense pressure on the line, you don't want it to fail. Mono's a little better. It's a little more abrasion resistance in the event that, they do maybe pull you down into the wreck and the rocks a little bit. I think you got a little bit of a better fighting chance. Again, and when you're fishing the bottom for them, you're deep anyways. I mean, sight, you don't really need to worry about like super light gear. But I think that's one failure that I've seen is that people just going way too light on the bottom and basically just getting smoked. It's not fun. Semi-Prom says 2 breakoffs last weekend. Yeah, man, that's a heartbreaker. Let the yellowtail grow for you. The yellowtail are big, man. There's ones on the island. So the thing that this is another thing too that Sammy's talking about as well. Yellowtail. The yellowtail actually live, and they're born and they live out on the patties. They actually live offshore when they're smaller. As they grow up and become adults and stuff like that, you hear the term home guards. When they get bigger, that's when they come into the islands. You typically won't find the rat yellowtails at the island. They live offshore. They school up. They're protected. They like to live under patties and structure. And all the rat yellows are typically kind of out further. So when you're fishing the islands for yellowtail, chances are they're going to be pretty big. This is big ass adult fish. They know how to take care of themselves. And when they grow up, they come in the shore. Same thing with La Jolla. You see those monsters caught weaving in and out of the kelp. It's always the bigger fish. So that's something you've got to think about too, is just the nature of where you are. You're going to be encountering bigger fish. Jared, what's going on, man? Yeah. So just go heavy. Trust me, you won't regret it. And it's going to be a hell of a fight, but you've got to get them up. Otherwise you're going to break. They're going to send you I've been there. I know exactly what happens. You're basically watching your drag go and there's nothing you can do. It's peeling, and then snap. It comes off and you already knew. Like it just got too deep. So islands, bottom fishing, go heavy. Now, if you're not slow pitch jigging and they're on the bottom, like I said, and you're doing like yo-yo fishing, it's not quite as necessary because they tend to eat it like they tend to chase it like further up the column, and if you can catch them, same thing with jigging. If you're slow pitch jigging and you get them 100 feet off the ground, you can usually fight them, and they're not going to make that run. But when they're down in the mud, be ready. Be ready to turn that head. Secondly, my second setup is if um, we are offshore. I just use kind of a light bait caster. I think this is anything like a Tranks 400, 500. I think this is the Penn Fathom 400 bait caster. And any jig sticks work perfect too. This is just like a M1 inshore, and I just use this to cast. And this is perfect when I'm sending out 60-gram jigs. This is like my go-to when I'm casting, sending out on patties. And in this instance, you can go lighter and you want to go lighter. So if you're fishing out on patties and you're looking for yellowtail, you don't want to use the heavy gear. So just know where you're going and make sure you've got setups, or ask the captain or the landing where you're fishing or where they're going for the yellowtail. So if you're going to go look for yellows off of patties, and I've seen monster yellows off the patties too, but it's typically okay because you've got time to fight them at this point. It's the water's typically so deep when you're patty fishing, you don't have to worry about running into the rocks. Sometimes you're like thousands of feet deep, over these patties. They're not going to make it that far. So in that case, you've got the opportunity to go lighter because now you can rely on your drag. You don't have to worry about super strong knot. You don't have to worry about having the heaviest gear to horseman. At this point, you can take your time. So this is the opportunity to use a lighter setup. You can even go 20-pound, 30-pound would be fine. But I think even 20-pound braid and even a 20-pound leader, I think it is plenty. So you want to have a reel that can still get it in. But again, you don't have to, you're not in such a hurry to get it up. So take that opportunity to use that to your advantage in using thinner gear. Use the thinner line that they don't see. Use thinner line where you can get a cast out further. And then you're relying on basically your setup being dialed in correctly, making sure that your drag is not too tight. Give them an opportunity to run, tire the fish out, and that's how you fight the fish. Let it tire out, bring it in bit by bit, let it make a run. It doesn't matter at this point. If it wants to make a run, it can make a run. So when I'm fishing patties and stuff like that for yellowtail, that's when I'll go out with my lighter gear. Throwing the heavier stuff is going to be detrimental because it's too heavy for where you're at. Fluorocarbon, if you guys like fluorocarbon, this would be the place to break it out. You know what I mean? Since your drag is going to be set lighter and your line is going to be thinner, I'm not too worried about the stretch. At this point, the drag should compensate for the stretch, since we're not buttoning down the drag, and it should take off and you should be good. When I'm fishing patties, usually there's a couple techniques that I use. When I'm casting out usually I'll use the 60 or the 40 gram, and it's not only yellowtail. Dorado smoke these things too. Yellowfin tuna all the time. But a lot of trips, we're patty fishing. You get the trifecta where you get all three. Basically, I pass there's a couple things I'll do. The first technique is when we're on the patty, I just cast a jig out, cast a 60 gram out, kind of off the patty, and I just let it fall. Most of the time, you'll get bit as it's fluttering down within like the first 10 to 20 feet. If there's food on the patty, a lot of times they'll come up and smoke it. I'll let it fall. If they don't, reel it up to the top, free spool it, let it flutter again, reel it up, free spool it, let it fall again. Usually you'll get bit somewhere within there, halfway to the boat, and you just get crushed. If that doesn't work and they want like a more faster action, I'll cast it out, and right at the surface, I'll pump it's almost like jigging from the bottom. You know how you do one pitch, one reel, and it's flicking the jig up? This is basically the same kind of concept, but you're doing that sideways through the column instead of up and down. So I kind of turn the rod to the side and I jerk the rod quickly as I give one turn, and the jig basically like flutters towards you. It dances and then it stop every now and then just a little bit and then kick it. You can do this pretty fast, and that jig just basically goes wild and kicks everywhere. And I've gotten a ton of bites out here in Florida. Yeah, that's been like, I think because the water's a little warmer, but We just been smoking like amberjacks and barracuda and surface fish that way, doing a much faster retrieve. They do like the slow one, but you can definitely do that pumping retrieve with the jigs. And at any point, just stop it every now and then, let it fall a little bit, and then do the same thing. Um, and when you're bottom fishing, try to use different type of lures as well. So we've got like a 130-gram jig, and then we've got the 80-gram ogre. Both of these I would fish at the bottom, Coronado, Catalina, whatever it is. But the difference with these jigs is, and this is why I would also say put like a heavier duty clip where you can change these off back and forth. The javelin jig falls really slow, but it's more of a vertical fall. It once it comes up, it'll kind of fall and flutter. It doesn't move that much within its zone. It flutters down. It looks really pretty, and it kind of like leaf falls, just up and down. The good thing about the ogre, so this is a different style. You can see the profiles. The ogre is actually lighter than the 130, but it's a lot longer. But it's just got a different style. But the ogre drops. But when you pitch the ogre actually swims and slides. So when you pitch this one, it goes like it'll take off and sometimes swim like 3 or 4 feet in one direction. Then you pitch it up and it'll slide again and basically dive. So it doesn't flutter straight down. The ogre comes up and dives and slides. So have different type of actions. And I talk about this when you guys are fishing spotties as well, is don't always just fish the sumo, don't always just fish the mercenary. They have two totally different falls. And if you switch them up and find whichever one the fish is wanting to bite, it's really the same thing. The sumo slides and glides. The mercenary falls kind of flat. Same thing. The ogre will come up and slide, and sometimes the fish will want that one. And as you pitch it quick and slide it, it darts back and forth. Where the javelin will kind of come up, and the samurai too just falls really fluttery and slow, but it goes pretty much kind of straight up and down and vertical. So you either get the vertical fall and flutter, or you get the slide, as you're bringing it up. So you've got to work with different actions. Just don't bring one jig. Slow pitch both of them and see what happens. And that's why I recommend heavy duty clips, so you can just switch them out fast. If you've worked one for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and it's just not working, throw one with a different action. See what happens. You can cast 80 gram, you can cast out on patties too, and basically get bit. So that would be basically my advice for the islands as far as jigs go. Patties, you could pretty much stick with, since you're retrieving it towards you. Mercenary, you can pretty much do all the work. But ogre works too. You can cast an ogre 80 gram if you got a heavy enough jig stick. And yeah, so I mean, those are really kind of my tips. And then just work when you're slow jigging the bottom, work on the cadence. And that's probably would be the third biggest tip I have is don't just fish at the same speed. Try short pumps, try long reels, long drops, try bringing it up, dropping without reeling, just working the bottom until you really find a pattern and what they're biting for. And you have some success. If you're just doing one reel, one pump for an hour and it's not working, switch it up. Do short little chops, then a half, short little chops, then a half reel. Maybe do 2 big pops off the bottom. Make the jig work for you. I mean, that's the beauty of slow pitch jigging, is you get to dictate how the jig works, what it does, and basically you can manipulate the bite. You're not stuck with just kind of one motion, one action. It's like the surface irons are fantastic, man. Southern California classic, but it's like one kind of way to fish it, right? Like you've got to surface iron is like you've got to know the speed at which your jig is going. You got to know that right speed, make it kick, and it does this thing. It kicks on top. It has a certain speed it's got to go, and it's kind of it. The versatility of the jigs. It's like even when you cast it out, you can burn it, you can slow it down, you can drop it, you can work it, you can flutter it. So use that to your advantage. Make the jig work for you, and change it up if it's not working for you. But I've had a lot of success slow pitch jigging for the yellowtails, and I think you guys can get bit. And even if you're not slow pitch jigging, just I think remember some of those tips. Like I said, even if you're live baiting at the bottom, make sure you're heavy enough where you can horse that thing up, with the drag. And then if you're fly lining and you guys are deep, you're good. You got time. Yeah, I mean, some of my tips. Those are my Yellowtail tips. Hopefully, some of you guys use them and get bit. And it's worked for me in the past. And those are, some things I've learned. Some things I've had to learn the hard way. Jigging too close to the bottom with too light a gear, and just watching the dreaded drag pole, and then and then you see the slack and your rod goes slack. You already know what happened. You bring up that freight ass line where it just broke you off. So let our mistakes basically help you get bit. Sammy says the 80-gram ogre got bit. Yeah, Sammy lost one, man, on the ogre. He's pulled the hook, man. That's a heartbreaker. That's crazy too. I don't know what. That's a king size fish or something. It just broke that hook off. I mean, I've landed monsters with that ogre. I mean, Kevin caught like an 80-pound grouper with that thing. I just don't know. That's a heartbreaker though. Sammy was like, "Hey, should I change the hooks on the ogre?" I'm like, "Nah, you're good." Then he's like, "Dude, the hook broke off." It's like, damn, that sucks. But the ogre will get bit, man. Ogre's awesome offshore. Something about like that slide when it goes, it just fish crush that thing. Bluefin, whatever, man. They get killed. Let me see what else. Yeah, I mean, I think that's basically all I got for you guys. Submission at sea. Obviously, we still got tickets, so we're coming up. Speaking of, yellowtail fishing, bluefin fishing, rock fishing, I'm going to be out there. I'll fly out there in October 23rd to the 25th. We're going on the Voyager. It's a very small trip, only 18 spots. We still got some spots left, but only 18 people total on the boat, so it's going to be cool. Even if you guys have never fished before, you want to learn slow pitch jigging, check out the trip. $875. It's 2 nights. We're gonna leave late. Friday. What day are we leaving? I don't know if it's Friday. We're gonna leave the 23rd late, and then we're gonna come back early. I think it's a Wednesday. Then we're gonna come back early on the 25th, 6 p.m. So leaving late, coming back early. 2 days later, 2.5 days later. So it's gonna be a good trip. I'm really looking forward to it. And yeah, check it out. Meals are included. We'll get you guys some jigs. We're gonna have custom hats made, goodie bags, raffle stuff like that. So looking forward to seeing you guys. Come fish with us. Come join us. And yeah, I think it'll be a blast. And some of you guys in the chat are already coming. So hit us up. QB Racks. Oos, late to the party. What's going on, man? Hope everything's good in Texas. We're just about to wrap it up. Alex the Fisher Dude, what's going on, man? Thank you for joining. Yeah, I mean, that's all I got for you guys. Really appreciate you. Hopefully you learned something. And yeah, get out there and fish. Check out CCA. Check out the MPAs. Look into that. See what you guys can do. Make your voices heard. And yeah, if you want submission jigs, obviously check out your local tackle store, submissionfishing.com. You know where to find us. I appreciate all the support from you guys. It's been great. If you have any questions about fishing, the jigs, any questions at all, hit us up on Instagram. Find us on our website, submissionfishing.com. I'm always there to answer questions or be a resource for you guys. So anything you need, we're just here to get you guys bit. And yeah, thanks for showing up. We'll upload this in Spotify like the rest. If you guys ever want to see any of the old episodes, we upload them on YouTube, and they're on Spotify as well. And yeah, guys, thanks for joining. See you next week. Oos.